3 up, 2 across, tap that play button 3 times, and walk through the archway into Dialogue Alley. Hello, and welcome to the show. Dialogue Alley is mostly about Harry Potter books, book translations, and all other things magical. I'm Erik from Nocturne Erik on Instagram, and with me as always is Carly from All the Pretty Books. Hello, Carly.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm on spring break this week, so spring break during COVID means I'm just kind of hanging out at my house getting some stuff done.
Yep.
Which I wish it could be more exciting, but hey, new house, we have a lot of projects to do anyway, so.
That's true.
Good to get things done. So we have a little bit of a different show for everybody today. We're going to mix things up. We're going to go right into news after this, followed by the translation of the show. And then we're going to go right to listener mail. This is kind of a mailbag episode. We got lots of listener mail this time.
We got a surplus of questions and they were all really good, so we just decided to answer them.
Yes. Hopefully this is kind of fun. I like kind of just more candidly talking about our experiences and things. So we'll see how this goes. So are you ready to get going with some Harry Potter news, Carly?
I am. Alrighty, so in the news, we have pre-orders up for the MinaLima Illustrated and Interactive Chamber of Secrets, which Erik and I both loved the Philosopher's Stone. You can get a signed copy off of MinaLima.com. It's £32 plus shipping, which gets kind of expensive in the US, and at this point it's very similar text block-wise and illustration-wise to the US published copy by Scholastic. So if you're not picky about getting a signed one or an unsigned one, you can get it off Amazon. Lots of bookstores. I found them at Barnes & Noble here. I found them at Target. I found them at Costco for like $22. But they weren't warehoused very well, and nor were they shrink wrapped like the other ones. And they had a lot of wear to the cover, but they were cheaper. So be aware of that.
Yes, and for those that are saying, hey, what's the MinaLima version? It's another illustrated version of all the Harry Potter books. They're going through 1 through 7, and these books are very interactive. They contain a lot of like dioramas and cutouts and little things that you can put together. In my opinion, they're well made, but it's a very delicate book. Like once you've kind of done all the things in it once, it looks very used.
Right. It gets fluffier because there's a lot of folding and unfolding. But they're really lovely. It's a really neat way to rediscover Harry Potter. It's a very tangible way to discover the books, which I enjoy. I don't think I'd recommend them for first-timers because there's a lot of things you may not get. But after you've read or seen the movies, because MinaLima are the ones who worked on the graphic art stuff for the movies originally. So there's some really cool things that tie in. So you've seen some of this before in the movies is how I felt when I was looking through the book.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really a fun way to rediscover the Potter series. And the illustrations themselves look more similar to like what I'd think of a graphic novel of the series would look.
Yeah, I was going to say graphic novel.
Rather than the beautifully illustrated Jim Kay books, which are very elegant. The colors are very wonderful. And I still like MinaLima's. They're very beautiful in their own way, just very differently illustrated. That's why I've got to have them both.
My approach as a collector for the first book was I wanted a signed copy, so I bought a signed copy. And that, to me, is just my I'm not going to open it and play with it copy. And then I bought a separate one to actually go through and build all the dioramas and fold things. So,
I did the exact same.
And I don't think I'm going to do that with the rest of the series. Honestly, buying 2 books, it's going to take up a lot of space. It's a lot of money. But if this is something that you really want to do, if you want a signed copy of these books, but still want to play with them, I would recommend getting 2 because it's going to look pretty shabby by the time you're done.
Right.
Even if you're careful, just because it's the purpose of this book. It's supposed to be an interactive experience.
Right. And on the website, MinaLima.com, it's on the home page, and you just go to Chamber of Secrets. It'll tell you about the pre-order. And it says £32 publishing the 26th October 2021, and they're shipping on the 25th. It says, when ordering other products from MinaLima.com, additional shipping charges. So that is something to be aware of, is shipping is going to be a thing. It says, due to very high demand, although we try our best, dedications cannot be guaranteed. And then it's signed, of course, by Mira Foramina and Eduardo Lima. And it's supposed to have 8 interactive paper-engineered elements featuring the Whomping Willow, Weasley's Burrow, and more. I'm so excited.
Ooh.
I know.
I'm excited, too. That sounds great. And, Carly, we should mention also quickly that this book is not signed directly on the book.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's signed on book plates now. Or at least the others have been. They don't say that on the website, but they're using book plates because they're not even signing the books themselves. They're signing the plates and then affixing the plates to the books as they ship out, just to keep things easier.
Yeah, it's essentially a sticker. It goes right inside the front cover, and the Philosopher's Stone signed copy that I have says this book belongs to,
right.
And then they've signed it. I'm not going to write my name on there,
no.
obviously. So just be aware of that. It, in my opinion, would be almost impossible for them to get a gigantic stack of these physical books and sign them directly on the paper.
Right.
One, because they take up so much space, and 2, because these books contain a lot of things that can just literally fall out of them. So opening and closing these books would be a lot hazardous. So
it's easier to do the plate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also just easier.
And the sheer volume, has gone up, I'm guessing, exponentially, because they also are the ones who did Crimes of Grindelwald and Fantastic Beasts. And I have a Fantastic Beasts that's signed to the book, and it's dedicated to me. My friend got it for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right. But then Crimes of Grindelwald is the first time I noticed a book plate. And it's undedicated. Okay. So I'm guessing by that point, they, volume and demand and all those things that tend to go with Harry Potter went up. And it just went down to ease of use and that kind of thing.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm definitely pre-ordering that. And October is just around the corner, right? So
it feels like it. I feel like 2021 is already going so quickly. I feel like once I get out of January, the year is gone.
I feel like I usually forget that I pre-ordered this book, and then I get the alert that it's on its way, and I'm like, whoa, hey, all right.
Yeah, I think we talked about that actually in one of our Instagram lives, because we both got the alert, and I was like, did I? Oh, I did. Good job, me.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We did talk about this in an Instagram live. That flew completely under the radar for me, and I did not order the first one as a pre-order.
Oh, wow.
And someone was texting me, and I'm like, oh, that book is out? I totally forgot. So I just ordered it.
Yep, and it came pretty quickly.
It was great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it did. It was great.
So highly recommend the Chamber of Secrets. It's going to be beautiful.
Yes. So now, Carly, let's kind of change things around a little bit, and we're going to go right into the translation of the show.
Fabulous. This one is one of my favorite translations, actually, because the language itself is so cool. So I'll let Erik talk about it.
So we're talking about the Faroese translation of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So if you, like me a couple years ago, say, what is Faroese? I am here to tell you a little bit more about Faroese in general before we start diving into the book.
Such a neat language itself. I've done loads of research on it. And in fact, Harrison speaks enough Faroese now. That's how he ordered some books out of there. And that's how he got the Faroese recording for the website. Actually, my project, the book that lives, over on my website, alltheprettybooks.net. That's how he got the recording for it. Is he called their tourist office and talked to them in Faroese. Yeah, he talked to them in Faroese, and he got the recording. And he learned Faroese, and they actually have audiobooks. They have Harry Potter audiobooks.
I was going to say, when I had dinner with him, and he was telling me about how he learned Faroese from the audiobook. And I said, you're probably the only non-native Faroese speaker to even listen to that.
I know. We talked about that. I feel like there's probably truth in that. And he's just really remarkable. He can just learn a language just by listening to Harry Potter books at this point, because he's so good with languages. It just blows my mind.
Yes, well, we'll definitely have him on the show at some point because I think he would be very interesting to talk
At least
to.
probably a few times, because he
Oh,
knows
yeah,
so
for
much
sure.
about so many things.
For sure. So Faroese, what is that? Well, Faroese is a Nordic language and it is spoken in the Faroe Islands. Now, the Faroe Islands is not a country. It is an autonomous territory, very much like Greenland. And also very much like Greenland, it is a territory of Denmark. In the Faroe Islands, they speak Faroese. So there's about 72,000 native speakers. I looked in 2007. However, the population of the Faroe Islands is only 52,000 people.
Right.
Which means there's about 20,000 or so native speakers that either, I would assume, moved to Denmark, moved to Greenland, or somewhere else in the world.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I mean, that's not a lot of speakers. When we're talking about some of these Indian languages that had 45 million speakers and don't have a translation of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or they do and it didn't sell well.
Right.
I mean, there's only 72,000 native speakers of this language. That's an extremely small number.
And they made all 7 books. And they made all 7 books in audio, too. So, but I think just from looking at their bookstores, of which they have several, they seem to be a pretty, like, reading-based society. Like, they really seem to value their stories and their books. So that could be part of it.
They do. And from an article I was also reading about the translation happening, people are very excited about it. I got the impression that people in the Faroe Islands are very proud that this language still exists, and it is very important to them that it maintains, it's still maintained in households. It is the official language of the Faroe Islands. So is Danish. Mm-hmm. But according to this other article I read, everyone in the Faroe Islands learns Faroese first, but then Danish is taught in school.
That makes sense. Also, if I remember properly, it's been a while since I've read it, but if I remember properly, when I was researching Faroese, I remember reading in a few articles that it was the closest thing to to what the Vikings spoke, as far as like some of the sounds and the vowels.
Yes, and that's funny you bring that up because there is actually like a language, I don't know if they're a committee or a council or something that decide, like what is and what isn't allowed in the language, much like, Spanish has.
French has that. Greenlandic has that as well.
Yeah, so I don't know what the official name of that is. I'm blanking on that at the moment. But the article I read about Faroese mentioned that it's such an old Nordic language that they constantly are having to allow for new words to be added to the language just because of all the new things that are currently
with the technology and things. Yeah.
Yeah. So those all have to go through the official language board or whatever they're called, the Jedi Council of Faroese.
Interesting. Yeah, I am fascinated by how much care they put into the preservation of their language. But I mean, it's a really cool one with really fabulous history. I don't blame them.
I know. Oh, and they want more people to learn it. When I got my book, we'll talk a little bit more how I got my copy in a second. But my book arrived with a bunch of pamphlets about, like, so you're interested in learning Faroese. And I was like, no, but thanks for all the pamphlets.
Do you still have them?
I don't know. I think I must somewhere because they were too good to not keep. And clearly the bookstore, it was a very small bookstore. I mean, there's only 52,000 people living in the whole country, and the capital city, I think, only has like 20 to 30,000 people.
Yeah, it's small.
So these bookstores are not huge. So I got the feeling that the person there looked at the shipping address and was like, hey, wow, this person's not from here and they want the book. Maybe they want to learn Faroese.
Yeah.
So they put all these pamphlets in there.
I never got the pamphlets, but they, like when Harrison, I believe he called and spoke to them, they were super excited.
To me, it seems like if I was living there and someone was trying to get this book, I would have a lot of questions for them too.
They also have, like, when I was scrolling through and getting my Philosopher's Stone and from the bookstore, they also had, like, Twilight, Alice in Wonderland, and several other, pretty popular books that were translated. I thought that was really nifty.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with just their desire to keep this language alive, right? So many of these languages that are spoken by such a small...
Yeah.
Yeah. So many languages spoken by such a small population, I mean, just die if you don't, keep it up. So Good for them. Yay, Faroe Islands.
Before you started looking into the Harry Potter translation stuff, did you know where the Faroe Islands were? I asked that because I didn't.
Nope, I knew it was in Europe somewhere. It's technically part of Europe, and I knew that. I just did not know where. I guess I assumed it was close to, like, Malta.
Yeah, that's actually what I thought.
Just because. I don't know why I assumed that, but that's just kind of where I thought it was, kind of in that Mediterranean Sea area.
I thought the same, and they're actually, like, way up north.
Yeah, they're halfway between Scotland and Iceland.
Yep. Very, very
in the middle of the water.
And they're just kind of, I believe they're a set of islands. It's not, it's just like a set of islands.
Correct.
I don't know how many.
It's a very cool place. I'd love to go there someday.
Me too.
I recommend just people listening, just look up the Faroe Islands. It's just a pretty cool little community there.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So let's talk about the book then quickly.
Okay.
So I'm not even going to try to say the publisher's name of this book, and clearly they knew that because on the spine of the book it just says BFL.
That's how I term it as.
I'm going for that because the other three words are very long, and I don't feel confident enough in my Faroese to give it a whirl. So this book was first translated in 2000, so not too far after the first book came out.
In Danish. However, even Danish was 98.
Yeah.
I wonder if that influenced it any, possibly, since they're a part of the Danish kingdom.
That's true, because I would assume that a lot of people there that wanted to read it would have read it in Danish, and maybe the Faroese Language Council
was like, we need that book
said,
too.
Hey, wait a second. We need it too, exactly. So there were two print runs of this book. There's a first print, that's the one that came out in 2000, and that one is a hardcover.
Yes, and super hard to find, by the by. So if you want a hardcover of that book, you need to grab it.
Yeah, and
if you see one,
like I don't have one, and they don't come up that often.
No, I think the last time I saw one was on eBay about a year and a half ago.
And then there's the softcover version. That's the one I own.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you buy that one from me?
Nope, I bought it directly from the bookstore.
Okay.
Remember, I got the pamphlets.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, you would not have sent me pamphlets.
I would not. Actually, I may if they came with the book because I'm a nerd that way.
Oh, that's true. This edition came out in 2016.
Yeah, they reprinted, I'm guessing because of the influx of translation collectors. I think they saw the demand there. And also, if people are trying to buy the whole set, like, you couldn't buy book 1 anymore, but they had books 2 through 7, at least at the time when I got mine, in hardcover in 2017-18.
I'm trying to look really quickly inside the cover if I can tell where it was printed. I know the capital city starts with a T, and I'm not seeing it on this page.
I think it's Tórshavn.
That sounds very much like it could be the answer. I'll have to give that a look-see later. But if you're looking to get just Faroese Book 1 softcover, the one I have, it's not difficult to find. However, you do have to go to, if you want to buy it directly from the bookstore, you have to go to a bookstore on the Faroe Islands website.
In the Faroe Islands website, yeah. And then it's all in Faroese, is what I ran into. And there's not a translator for that. Like, Google Translate doesn't, at least at this time, handle that.
I want to say that when I was on there, the website did have one.
Right. There's a big bookstore that does have an English toggle over, but not all of them.
The grass roof.
Right. But not all of them have that.
My go-to always is, if I can't figure out the website, if I can't translate it, if I can't stumble my way through it based on how to buy stuff on an online website, you can always email the place.
They typically will have somebody who can speak English to you.
Yes, and I don't want to assume because I don't know anything about the Faroe Islands, but most people in Denmark speak English. I would assume also that there are a fair few of people in the Faroe Islands that also speak English, or at least well enough to help you order a book.
Right. I will say, like, when I got my softcover Faroese from the bookstore, they weren't stored very well. And I had a few that came where the covers were, like, bent, and I had one that was, like, torn all the way almost in half across the back cover.
Oh, no, that's
and
not
it was
good.
Brand new from the publisher. So just be aware that that is a thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it really does depend on how they're stored, because mine is pristine. Like, it looks like it's immaculate. Like, every corner is crisp. It's perfect. It's a perfect book. So yeah, it's all about how it's stored and how it's shipped. And speaking of shipping, this book doesn't cost you very much itself. However, the shipping from Faroe Islands is extremely high. So be willing to pay over $50,
Yeah.
maybe not over $100. I want to say that
It was
paid,
high.
Yeah, I want to say I paid like $85, $80 after shipping.
I mean, there's a reason why that when you see them on eBay or you see people selling them, there's a reason they're $90 is because it's just high. They're just high.
Right. So that's just kind of what they go for because it's hard to ship them out of the Faroe Islands. So if you or your friends happen to just be going there, for sure, I would recommend picking it up in the Faroe Islands.
Yeah.
But I don't see that as a likely trip.
No, and I don't see anybody. I've not met anyone who. Well, most of the people I met when I tell them about Faroese, they're like, "What's that?" And I tell them it's in the Faroe Islands, and then what's that? So I've not met anyone who's been to the Faroe Islands so far, and most of my friends and people I know are travelers.
Believe it or not, one of my colleagues, her daughter went to the Faroe Islands.
Oh wow! Did she love it?
She did. She said it was really great. She got me. I think she got me Slovakian. She got me a book from somewhere. No, she got me a book from Estonia. That's right. She got me a book from Estonia. But she said, "Hey, I'm going to the Faroe Islands. Do they have a book there?" And I was like, "They do, but I have it already. That's a shame."
That's still
because
neat,
that would have
though.
been way cooler.
Yeah,
it is cool. So that's the Faroese translation of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
And we have no idea how many of them were printed, but we know there's a lot more softcover than hardcover. That's for sure.
Yep. Check it out. If you're having trouble locating one and you want to try to find one, I'm more than willing to point you in the direction of a bookstore in the Faroe Islands that can sell you one.
Ditto. But there's a few, actually. There were a few the other day when I was on eBay. There's a few up on eBay. And at some point when I get around to sorting my stuff, I have a spare to sell some when I just need to find it.
Oh, awesome. So there's an even easier way to get one if you just want one right now.
You have to wait until I can find it. But yeah, there's one on eBay, or you can wait for me to get my stuff together.
That's true. Okay, Carly. Well, let's move right into our super special listener mail segment.
Fabulous. This will be fun.
All right, so today we decided to answer a bunch of listener mail. We got a handful, so we'll see how much we can get through today. And I don't know, we could call it, is this Owl Post? Are we reading Owl Post today, Carly? Maybe surely that's been taken by somebody.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it's been taken by a lot of somebodies. It's too easy.
We could call it Howler Edition, and I could just scream all the questions into the microphone.
Please don't. Please don't.
Oh, that would be kind of funny, though.
It would not.
Oh, well, I would think it
would be funny to watch it, but my ears would be upset at you.
All the questions that we have today were submitted one of two ways. We either got them as a message on Instagram, so you can follow our Instagram at Dialoguealleypodcast and always send us a direct message, or look for opportunities to just answer or ask a question in the story on Instagram. You can also email us at dialoguealleypodcast@gmail.com. We will check that email as well. And if we get a question from you, we'll always respond just so that you know we have received it.
Right.
So that way you know that it's in the queue to be answered. So we're going to try to get through 7 questions today. Does that sound like a reasonable number?
I think so.
And by reasonable, I mean the most powerfully magical number, 7?
Yes.
We'll go with that. That seems way better.
Okay.
All right. Do you want to kick it off, or do you want me to kick it off?
I'll let you kick it off.
All right. So the first question is from Sean in Seattle. This is Sean McAllister, actually. He was on episode 4, I believe.
I think you're right. I think it was 4.
Go check out episode 4. Sean is also a translation collector, and he asks how many translation collectors are out there.
Who?
What do you think, Carly?
I would have to say, given all of the email that I've gotten from people that are, hey, I've just started collecting over the past couple of years, and how many I've seen being sold up on eBay by lots of different people, I would have to say it's probably upwards of 500, maybe 1,000 or higher. I'd say it's got, and the demand of the books, like the prices have risen as the demand has increased. So that, and I mean, the big six are wickedly high right now. So I think the demand is there. I think it's up. And there's so many people that I've met that are translation collectors that I've met via email that aren't on Instagram, which is where a lot of us just kind of chat with each other. So there's probably a lot that we don't even know about.
Right. I was going to mention that there are a few that I know of that I correspond with frequently, not on Instagram as well. So I don't know. I don't think there's any way to actually know.
And that's kind of a broad question, too, because if you're, like, I know several translation collectors, but they only collect the German translation, or they only collect, like, the Chinese translations. They only collect Italian translations because there's so many, but they don't collect the other ones. So, I mean, it's kind of a broad thing.
Right. And I know a few that only collect cover art that they enjoy, or I know some that only collect books from places that they have personally visited.
Right.
And that is staunchly their quest. They're not going to aim to acquire them all. They just want to get one everywhere they go. And it's more of a casual, fun collection. And there's also people that collect translations of a particular book.
Right.
Like, I only do book 1, but there are people that only do book 5 or book 7 or whatever their favorite book is as well.
Right. And so, I mean, that's a pretty broad question, but it's a very good one.
It is. And you mentioned the big six, Carly. I don't think we've talked about what that means on this
Oh, yeah,
show
probably
yet.
not. We did talk about them, though. We just had a different term for them, I believe.
We did. And can you just mention what those 6 books are? These are the consensus in the collecting community is that currently these are the 6 rarest books.
They're the 6 hardest to find is where the term came from. It's the Malayalam, Gujarati, Asturian, Nepali, I'm blanking, Greenlandic. Is that 5?
That's 5. And the first Macedonian
That's
translation.
right. I always forget Macedonian, and I don't know why.
Because there's 2 of them.
Maybe.
Maybe? I don't know.
But even before the second translation came out, I'd forget it. So I think I just blink on it. I don't know.
So those are the 6 thought to be currently, and they currently are, the 6 hardest to find translations of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Right.
So if you have one,
good job.
Like, give yourself a high five, because those books are a thorn in most people's sides that are trying to acquire all authorized translations.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's move on to question 2.
Question 2. Do you have any stories about rare, valuable books getting lost in the mail? Brought from N.E. at Harry Potter.
That's
Lubarak?
It's Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
That's Nebraska.
I didn't realize he was in Nebraska. He's a very fun guy to talk to.
He is, and that's exactly what I'm going to go into here. Is his Instagram handle at Harry Potter Lubarak. Lubarak is it means books in Basque.
Oh, cool. I learned something today. Thank you, Brock.
Thank you, Brock. Yeah, he specified that in his question, which I found very enjoyable. So, Carly, any stories about really tragic mail losses?
I do, but it's
a very depressing question.
I know, but it's one of the things that we kind of briefly glossed over, that if you're doing lots of mail, weird stuff happens. And I've had lots of weird stuff happen. But the story that comes to my mind was actually not Harry Potter books, thankfully. So probably 6 years ago now, I'd purchased 6 ARCs from a seller who was just selling off his ARC collection, who lived in Japan. He had just moved, and he didn't want to deal with moving his books back. So I purchased them off eBay. He sent them express mail. And with express mail, once they arrive at the post office, you only have 3 days to pick them up before they're mailed back to the return sender. And my postman brought the little slip saying, "They're here," on day 5.
Oh, no.
I know.
That's terrible.
So I tootled up to the post office, happy to get my ARCs. And they were like, "Oh, well, it's already been mailed back." And I was like, "I just got the slip today." It was even dated. Like, they could see that I wasn't lying. And they were like,
"Oh, boy.
Oh, well, they've already been mailed back." And I was like, "Well, they need to come back. You need to reroute them here." And they're like, "It's already out of
the plane.
Like, they checked and they'd already made them back to Japan. And I was like, and then the seller apparently was hardly ever on eBay. He was, doing other things. And so a few months later, like, I'd emailed him and explained what happened. And a few months later, he was like, hey, why are these back in my P.O. box? What happened? And I was like, explain the story. And he mailed them back to me I just had to pay return shipping again. And I was at the post office. I told them the day that he said he mailed them, I gave him the tracking number and I said, they're on the way. Please don't do it again. I'm going to come every day until I get them, because it was several $1,000s worth of ARCs is what it was. And they're pretty fragile because, they're ARCs and they were all softcover ARCs at that. And I was just fit to be tied because they traveled halfway around the world, actually around the world and halfway back because of an error on the post office. And that is when I got my P.O. box.
Yes. Well, yeah, that would help in terms of avoiding that situation. And ARC, again,
is an advanced reader copy.
Yes. So before a book is released to the public, it is printed in an advanced reader copy, and it is given to reviewers. It's given to sometimes like booksellers, just members of the press, people in the publishing that work for the publisher, just people to read it ahead of time to kind of develop a buzz for the book for it to come out. And
in the UK, they're called proofs, or at least Bloomsbury proofs. The Harry Potter advanced reader copies are proofs.
They are. Well, I'm glad that you got them.
Me too. I was fit to be tied for quite some time. I have another story about Potter books if you want me to tell it.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I bought a movie prop. It was the wand box from movie 1 that, when Harry's in the Ollivander shop and all the boxes come out. Yeah. It was one of those boxes, and then it was a signed Joe book. It was a signed, bookplate signed Half-Blood Prince from Bloomsbury. And the person I bought it from addressed it wrong. Instead of Helotes, they'd addressed it. Helotes is the town I was in at the time. They addressed it to Help Resolve, I'm guessing because of an autocorrect thing. And then they had the zip code was a New Mexico zip code and not a Texas zip code, so it just disappeared off the map. And my post office was like, we can't even find it anywhere. We can see where it was coming here, and then it just disappears. And this was about, $700 to $1,000 worth of stuff. I was just so upset. I'd bought it from a friend, and it was one of those, I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? Because it's going to get awkward. It's not here. I found it, my post office, the postmaster at that post office called me, we found your books, because I was there literally every day. They're like, we found your books.
It was sent to Japan.
No, no, it showed up in the pile in Atlanta to be incinerated. I had 2 days to get it out. That's where they go, I guess all the unclaimed mail goes, and it wound up in the unclaimed mail, mail package thing. And they're like, we'll call them right now, and we'll get it diverted. We need to be patient, because they don't always answer the phone. And so she called, I think, I drove up there for this, because I was just on pins and needles. And she called, I think, 7-8 times and finally got somebody to answer, and they mailed it. I got those items. And I was so relieved. That's when I found out when I picked up the envelope with the address issue where it said Help Resolve. I was like, oh my word.
Well, again, though, you were able to get it back.
Yes, I was. And I couldn't imagine.
Well, I couldn't either. I have 2, they're not really rare books. First is my first translation of Turkish, which is The Magic Stone.
Oh, right.
And I bought 2 copies. I bought the first one from a used bookseller site in Turkey, and it wasn't for that much money. That book is getting harder to find, but it's still out there. If you come across the right website, you can find it pretty easily. But
they must have printed a lot.
I think they did, or maybe everyone that had it already just kind of dumped it once they got the other one, if they're actually reading it, because the translation was not very good.
No.
So the first one I got, it just never arrived, and I emailed the person, and they felt bad. They emailed that they had a confirmation that it was sent, and I honestly do believe that they sent it. It doesn't seem like it was a scam.
Yeah.
Even though the website, it wasn't a shady website. It just was more of a unregulated buyer and seller website. The
Craigslist
web
kind of
page
thing.
is not. Yeah, and the web page it's a legitimate web page, but it's more of just a space for people to vend what they have.
Right. Like Toto Collection.
Yeah, it doesn't go through the website. it goes through the seller.
Right.
Like, so it's not like an Amazon. Anyway, that never came. And I just bought another one from a different seller, and it did arrive. And
I
that one
remember
arrived
when that
with
one came.
yeah, the one that did arrive came in an envelope. That was like a cardboard box type thing. I don't know, but the whole box was covered in stamps. Like, it wasn't just they print out the postage cost and stick it in the corner. It was, let's see how many stamps you can put on there to get up to like $27.
It was like Mrs. Weasley had done it.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So there's a picture of that on my Instagram if you want to check that out. It's pretty funny. And then the other one I've mentioned before, I ordered the Belarusian book from the publisher when it came out.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, and it just never got here. It cleared customs in Queens, New York, and then after that it just disappeared. And I filed a lost package claim, and I honestly have no idea where this thing went. It probably fell off a truck and is in the woods, or was in a person's bag that got lost or stolen. So whatever. I was able to get another one from Harrison. Actually, he bought a couple extra, so I bought one from him. But that was kind of a bummer because I had bought 3 copies.
You actually bought before Harrison did.
I did, and one of them was for you, Carly.
Was
it? One of them was for me. Yeah, that was the arrangement at the time.
Right.
One of them was for you, one of them was for me, and then one of them was for one of my colleagues who's from Belarus, so she was able to like read it and was excited to get it. So I felt the worst about it that she didn't get a copy of it.
Right. I was about to say, like, I know we were covered, but I felt bad for her now that I know that she didn't get one.
Yeah, so those are my 2, I guess, worst books getting lost in the mail or not arriving story. So again, not devastating,
right?
But still disappointing.
But had a good
ending. If you're in the game, it did. If you're in the game, though, like you mentioned, and you're shipping lots of things, it's bound to happen sooner or later. I guess you just hope that it happens to a book that isn't like one of a kind,
right? Or signed or something. And thankfully, like with my signed Joe book and the movie prop, I remember explicitly my friend had asked if I wanted to add tracking for like, I think it was £15 more. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And I remember debating about doing it or not, because I remember thinking that was excessive. If I hadn't done that, I would have lost them.
Right. You would have. It would have been totally gone.
Yep. I can't.
Oh, you know what? I had more than 2. We've already talked about this. My Maori book never showed up, my first one. But they sent me a second one.
They were really nice about it.
They were super nice about it. So I wasn't devastated in any way. All right. Let's move to question 3.
Awesome.
Question 3 comes from Sammy in Utah. She sent in a question before.
Yeah, and she's so nice.
She must really like our show.
Thank you, Sammy.
That means we like you.
Yes.
Yay. So Sammy asks, is there something other than Harry Potter books that you would collect that is still Harry Potter themed? So I'm assuming either something that we do collect, or if we didn't collect books, what would be something Harry Potter related that we would collect?
That's a good question. I collect Funko Pops also, even if I'm not going to admit it. And I don't collect them all. There's no way I could do that. There's too many of them. But I do collect the ones that I really enjoy.
Yeah, so it's just more of a casual collection of what you
And I don't buy them on the secondary market. If I can't get them new from the store, I'm not going to get them.
Because some of those Funko Pops, they're either fake. There's a lot of fake ones out there, actually.
And then
they're also
and they can get expensive.
Ones that are I was going to say they can get ridiculously expensive, much like books can.
Right.
So,
and I can only have one expensive hobby.
Yeah, they remind me a lot of like action figure collections.
Yeah, actually, they do.
Which, I mean, they're essentially action figures with not as much action. You wouldn't take them out of the box and ever play with them. They're more so to just look at.
I mean, their heads turn, most of them anyway.
I don't know. We have one Funko Pop at our house, and it's Carl from the Pixar movie Up.
Oh, cool.
That's our only Funko Pop. We don't collect them. I don't know. I don't know what I would collect.
Because you just do books. You have other collections that aren't Harry Potter, but with Harry Potter, you just do the books. So I guess I'll ask you, if you did not collect books, it wasn't on the table. You were like, ew, right. Book collecting. What do you think Harry Potter themed you'd do?
I don't know. It was... If the books didn't exist, like the translations didn't exist, I could see myself getting into wands, I suppose.
Ooh, nice. Interesting.
And talking to Robbie on the last episode, I mean, I was doing a little more just Googling of the, the wands that he was mentioning on the show, and I was checking out his page some more, and There are, in my opinion, still like a ton of wands. I don't know if I would be a completionist collector of wands, but I would see myself maybe buying a new one like every time I went to the parks, or maybe if I went to a special event. I could see myself like getting more of a smaller collection of wands.
Yeah. Interesting.
If I didn't have books.
Right.
Because they are really cool, and they're cool to look at, and they look great when you display them.
They do. I would agree with all of those things.
All right, Carly, do we have question 4?
We do. HP Film Wizardry book is fun. What's your favorite non-translated book HP item? And that is from X Dahlia X at St. Paul.
Oh, yeah. Yep, I know her. She's on Instagram, XDahliaX. She is from St. Paul. It's very close to where I live.
Very cool.
Very cool. So Harry Potter Film Wizardry is a book about the Harry Potter films and kind of how they were made. It's more of like a behind-the-scenes.
Very awesome. I actually
book.
haven't flipped through or seen those. I don't own them. So it's very cool to learn about a book I don't have.
Yeah, and I don't have it either. I do know that they have it at my school library. I teach at an elementary school, so they tend to just kind of stock all the Harry Potter stuff. So if it's a Harry Potter related book, they usually have it at my school, so I'll flip through there and decide if I want to buy it or not. Usually I'll just get my fix from flipping through it once and reading it. But I have I do have one. I have one non-translated Harry Potter book item. It is the History of Magic book that originally was published by Bloomsbury. You could only get the Bloomsbury book for a spell there.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended. And Scholastic did eventually come out with one as well with its own cover. So they have different covers. But this book is essentially just kind of the history of the Harry Potter phenomenon. And they have Jim Kay art.
Oh, nice.
From his illustrated books in there. They have pictures of the movie props. They have like interviews with people. It's just a really cool kind of behind the scenes look at just the history of Harry Potter in general.
Very cool.
I would highly recommend that book if you don't own it, to either buy it or to just, check it out at the local library and read it, because it is really a cool book. And it's huge. It's the same size as the Jim Kay illustrated books.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to check it out maybe. I am pretty, with my books, I have, most of mine are really Harry Potter books. I don't have, I have the auxiliary books, like the Tales of Beedle the Bard, those guys.
Yeah.
But, I have the unauthorized
Do you have the cookbook?
Yeah, I have the unauthorized cookbook.
Yeah.
I've made nothing out of it, but I'm going to have to say, I guess that's my favorite, because I don't have one otherwise that I can remember anyway.
Well, I have it too. I think we should have a cook-off.
We should. We each pick, I don't know, we'll figure out how that'll work.
I still want you to make that time-lapse video of you making the treacle tart.
I know. Now that I'm getting moved in, though, I can probably do that.
That would be fun.
It would be.
Yeah, I think we should each pick the same thing and cook it, and then just take a picture, and we can see.
And then a video of
how
us
they
eating
turned
it,
out.
and see how watch our faces. Because I'm pretty, I'm pretty emotive. When I taste something I don't like, I can't fake it. It is instantly evident on my face.
All right. Well, thank you for that question. Question 5. It says, this is from Jeff from Syracuse, New York, I'm assuming. How many printings of the paperback large print French Philosopher's Stone were made?
That's a tricky question.
I can't believe I got through that without fumbling any words.
No, you did very good. So first of all, I think we need to distinguish. There are French books that are bigger than the typical small ones that most people think about.
Right.
And that's not the large print book. They're just bigger. Gallimard, the publisher who did the French Harry Potter books, made 2 different sizes, the small pocket ones and then a larger set of them. But those aren't the large print. There is actually a large print, and it's by a totally different publisher. I have the large print Philosopher's Stone, but I don't have it with me. It's actually up in another place. So I don't know if the publisher includes how many copies, and I can't even tell you the publisher is, but I can answer these things later when I have it with me. Maybe.
Awesome.
I can at least answer publisher. I don't know if it'll say how many copies. And it only lists, Gallimard, the French publisher, they'll say how many copies were in that print run that book is associated with, but I don't I don't know how many copies. I don't know if that's common for French publishers. I don't typically look at that information when I'm reading my French books, so I don't know.
Well, it looks like you can get your detective hat on, Carly, and unpack that book.
And I don't know. I don't
answer.
think they're super very common because you don't see them pop up very often. I've seen a Chamber of Secrets large print pop up that I wished I would have bought, but I didn't for whatever reason. But I've not seen past book 2 at the moment, so I don't even know if they made past book 2 or if they're just for like super exclusive libraries or what.
Yeah, I don't know. The first time I was exposed to a large print Harry Potter book was at my library, and I was like, whoa, what's this one? And I opened it up, and the words were huge.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And they were large. The print was large, believe it or not, in the large print book. And these books are obviously published for people that are either losing their eyesight or elderly, or you just don't want to squint. Or just vision issues,
yeah.
Yeah. So they're just printed bigger. So if
and I mean, the Bloomsbury has the large print as well. Actually, there's different covers of the Bloomsbury large print at this point. And they're also large print are available in the U.S. too. Different publisher, but it's there. And the large print in the U.S. is actually available in soft and hardcover.
Ooh, I didn't know that. Yep. Mine is hardcover.
I have both.
I'll have to look into that some more.
Yeah.
All right, Carly, question
6. Are Harry Potter translations a good long-term investment? Adam from the UK. That is a murky thing we've loosely talked about, I think, on the podcast. I know you and I have talked about it just on the phone. I think the issue that you run into with translations that you don't run into with, say, the first edition, first print Harry Potter books is reprinting. So, like, we'll use the Macedonian as an example. Or, we'll use Bosnian as an example. So, the Bosnian translation of Philosopher's Stone was in really, really, really high demand. And I'm guessing not many copies were made. I was getting emails, actually quite a few emails from people in Bosnia looking for the Bosnian translation, asking if I had any spares, any information on where to find one, just any help whatsoever at all. And they're in the country where the book is published, and I'm in the States. So they must, it must have been really hard to find. And they'd found me through my website.
And this was a translation that was not hard to get when it initially came out.
No, it wasn't hard to get at all.
Right, this is before I really started getting into the translations where I would just I'd admit that I was not going to go to Bosnia, so I was just going to buy it online. And they were impossible to get. And you had even mentioned to me, like, wow, literally a year ago, I had a stack of like 10 of these.
It's really true, because I didn't know that they were going to be that hard to find, because I got mine straight from the publisher, but the publisher, I guess, sold out shortly after I got mine, and they didn't reprint. So anyway, fast forward, Bosnian was starting to sell really high, like $200, $300, $400 high. And
yep, I bought mine high.
Yeah, and then I didn't know that actually, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I did.
And then they reprinted, and now it's the cost of a new book. I will say that the size of the book is different, the cover of the book is different, and it's a different textured cover. It's still the same illustration, though, so I mean,
if you didn't have them sitting next to each other, you would have to look pretty hard, in my opinion, to know that they were which one is which. Like there's a couple tells, like the size is a tell.
Well, the width of
you said the
I
texture
can
is a tell.
But I was annoyed by several things with book 4 versus the other 3.
Right.
That's why I would know. But I mean, it devalued that first print, or that first one, pretty drastically, because now there's no reason to buy that one when you can just buy the other. The text block is fairly unchanged. It's the same illustration. It's just slightly different binding.
It's the same translator, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, there's no point to spend $400 or $500. It's not like this, the Macedonian that has, 2 translations, right? So if you're really going to be a completionist, right? If you're going to be a completionist collector, you have to have both, because they're different translators, different publishers, different covers.
Bosnian is one of the examples of a book that I bought high, and I didn't buy it at the peak of the heightness.
Right.
Is that a word? I didn't buy it at its peak value, but I did buy it. It was in my final 4 translations to acquire.
And you weren't sure if you were going to get another chance to buy it, because at that point reprint hadn't even been a thing.
Exactly. And so I've mentioned this before, and I've said this to you and other people that are collecting, like, I'm not a reseller. I get books that I want to have in my collection. And so at that point in time, there were 4 translations I needed. One somehow became available from another collector that was selling some of his collection. I bought it from him, knowing that I probably spent a little bit more than I wanted to for it. However,
You got it.
I had it. And then I only had 3 left on my list to get. So it's really up to you. Like in those situations, it becomes a question of, do you want it for a good investment or do you want it for your collection?
Right.
And who knows? Like these books, the Bosnian ones could go out of print again in 2 years and they could all skyrocket in value again.
Right. And
as well.
Last time I was on the website,
know.
like book 3 was out. They'd sold out of book 3. I'm guessing they're going to have to reprint, but it was out on the website. So I don't know. I would have to say cautiously yes.
There's
I would
agree with
translations
that
that aren't going to be reprinted. Like in my wildest estimations, I would never see Greenlandic being a thing again. The publisher who printed Greenlandic is out. The translator died. And I've talked to actually quite a few Greenlanders who like, why do we need it? We can read it in English, Danish. The Greenlandic was more of a novelty.
Right, and they have, unless too many translation collectors are buying them all from Greenland, which is actually happening. But I mean, they have Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, again, is not a huge city.
No.
So if they have 4 or 5 copies of this book in the library, that's probably sufficient for the amount of people that
there's only
don't own one already.
There's only 16,000 people, give or take, in Nuuk, and that's their biggest city.
Right. And so if you're wanting to read this book in Greenlandic and you're from Greenland, you either own it already and you're not letting go, or you say, hey, I can just borrow it from the library and read it and put it back.
Right.
Like, I don't need to own this. So I would agree, like, that's a book where the value is going to maintain, but there's no way to be sure, right? There's just absolutely no way to be sure.
Well, if it were to be redone, if there were to be, it wouldn't be a reprint more than likely. They'd have to rebuy the rights and all of those things. It would probably be a new translation. I don't see anybody. So I would say Greenlandic would be a safe bet as far as an investment goes. But things like where the publisher is still actively publishing other books, even if the book is out of print from them and long out of print, they could still, I've gotten a lot of emails about, this book. Why don't we just reprint it? And then they rebuy the rights and reprint it because they can see they can recoup their cost. So that is a fear. And that's when it's like, do I really want to spend $1,500 on this?
It depends. Like I said with the Bosnian book, if you're in it to collect them all, if you're not in it to buy and sell, you might not have another opportunity to get it. So you have to decide, is this something that I want and feel comfortable doing?
Right.
Knowing that I may not have this opportunity ever again. Right.
And then there's even nuanced things. Like if we go to Icelandic, the first 2 covers of Iceland, the publisher's not going to reprint those. So those are probably better investments than, some other things. It's a very hard question because it's not just a straightforward, I think this will be great in years down the road. I think so. The demand is certainly, there's a lot of new, like we just discussed with the translation collector question. There's definitely an influx of translation collectors, and we see that being reflected in the market of these, these things are starting to sell higher. I mean, 2015, 14, when I got in, I could buy a lot of these for, I remember thinking $50 was a lot for a translation, and now that's pretty common.
Yeah, I thought that at the same time too.
Yeah. So,
and then realizing that you're going to have to spend a lot more if you want a complete collection at this point.
Right.
That was a conversation I had to have with my wife, obviously.
Right.
Like at that point, it's a family decision, not just I'm going to spend money willy-nilly. So, we had a conversation about, like, I guess, is it an investment? Like, if I had to sell my books right now, if we needed the money, I could do it.
You could sell them for what you bought, if not more.
Right. So
which would be an investment in the, cut and dry terms.
Yes. But if you are making an investment in language preservation and keeping languages alive and making sure that books are not destroyed, then yes,
Absolutely.
Harry Potter translations are a good long-term investment.
Right. So but as far as money goes, that's a more nuanced answer.
Yeah. And man, I know I want to be able to get this other question in here, but there are so many. I'm thinking back to our conversation with Sean about translations from India when he was talking about those. We don't know how many of these books are around or just sitting in someone's house that they don't know the value of. So at any given time, like 10 more could show up and be available. And that doesn't mean that there are 10 people right now willing to buy that book. It's
exactly. And that's where it gets hard. And you see that with other books. Like, for example, there's an author called Cormac McCarthy. And his first book, like the first print of his first books, they're $5,000, $10,000 books, especially if they're signed. But you'll see like 15 of them up on eBay at any given time, and they're actually really, really hard to find outside of eBay, but they're all up on eBay. So it makes it seem like they're less harder to find, and it devalues the book overall, because if I want to find it, I just go up on eBay. It'll be there.
Right. And I know there are people that are looking for certain translations, but again, you have to really commit to it. You can't just decide like, oh, I'm going to spend a bunch of money tomorrow because one's available. Like, this is something that you'd have to save up for.
Right.
Obviously, I saved up for it. I didn't just have all this money lying around, right? I had to decide like, okay, I'm going to start putting some money away, and if one becomes available,
right,
I have to decide if I want it. It's harder to just find a buyer for a translation versus a first edition, first print of a Bloomsbury Philosopher's Stone book. There are people there that either have tons of money or they've been saving their literally entire life to buy this book. So I think there's always going to be buyers of that book. I don't know if there are always going to be buyers of translations, is what I guess I'm trying to say.
At least all the time. Like,
right.
Some of the time.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But like, and your point is actually very well illustrated. About 2 years ago, we had 5 Greenlandics that came on the market at about the same time. And it was just a bunch of people, and I say a bunch, 5, were just decided to sell them. Well, they weren't all selling for $2,000, which is what one had just sold previously for. But the others, like the demand was lowered because there wasn't 5 more people looking for them. I think the 5th one, it took like a year or 2 to sell off.
I know one of the sellers of one of those 5 books was selling an extra that he had, and he was on the tail end of that, and he was on eBay for like $500 and for a long time, and nobody bought it.
And if that had been even a few months prior, it would have been snapped up.
Right. And so there were 5 available at that time. There were only 4 people really looking for them.
Right. And so that's when it goes back to, I don't know how many translation collectors. I know there's a bunch of us that had the Greenlanded. And what we kind of loosely talked about in one of our episodes is, of the hardest Harry Potter collections, to find Greenlandic seems to be the easiest, which is weird. And I would guesstimate
for now.
For now.
For now.
But that it probably will change, if I'm being honest. I say that, I don't know. Right. But if I had to guess, I'd say there's probably less than 1,000 of those made. And how many of them are left to be sold out of Greenland, I don't know.
Right. So then at that point, you're buying them from a collector who already has the book and knows the value of the book and knows that there are people looking. So
right.
It's just a really weird economic dynamic.
It is. It's not cut and dry like the first edition or the signed books. There's a lot more, I'd say there's a lot more fluctuation. And it's just the dynamic of it. It's really fun. And if you're thinking about collecting translations, I really hope you do so. It is really fun, and I've met the best people doing it. But there's a dynamic involved that's very different than just typical book collecting. Like, we don't typically care about first prints at all unless it's a different cover. We don't care about it. We just want the language.
Right, and I obviously don't want to overpay for something. However, like, there are times where, I bought something and then the value of it has gone down a little bit. But again,
it's just a risk.
It's just part of it. And to me, it's more about getting the book. Do I have the book versus did I buy something that is now worth more money? That's not really why I'm in it.
Right.
But it's part of the game too. So you have to keep tabs on that as well.
Exactly. You don't just want to be like, oh, that is priced at $300 when you can go get it for $30. That's
exactly,
silly.
Right.
But I mean, do your research. But if it's priced at $300 and you're not sure if you're going to get it again, and then they reprint it later, well, you didn't know, so you did the best that you could with the information at the time.
Exactly. Right. So there's that. That's a great question.
Yeah, really very, very long. We could continue that discussion for a long time. Good job.
We sure could, but I want to fit this 7th and most magical number question.
Yes, because this is a very good question too.
It is. So this question is from Jess. I think that's one of your friends, and she asks, who was your favorite character in the book, and were they your favorite character in the movie?
And that's interesting because we've talked about quite a bit on our Instagram lives, and I believe on the podcast some, about how the characters are very different sometimes between the books and the movies, just because of what was and what wasn't left out. And I had never thought about this question before, but it's a very good one.
I haven't either, but I have a definite answer.
Uh-oh. Go on.
I guess my favorite character in the book, if I had to pick one, is probably Dumbledore.
Yeah.
One, because he's just like the man, right? He's like the best wizard ever. And not only is he the best wizard ever, but he's so like nonchalant and goofy, especially in like the first 2 books. Right, he's just hilarious. And I think that is super interesting as a character dynamic. It just reminds me of, just these kind of like savants that are just dynamic.
Very out there.
A skill. Right. And I mean, like, it's apparent that in the first 2 books that this guy is just an absolute genius. But I really like his lightheartedness and his kind of more human side.
And I liked his answer for the Mirror of Erised.
Yeah, and that like sums it up right there, Or even like at the feast in the first book when he says his 3 words or 4 words, whatever, a few words, and they're just random words.
Yeah, like nitwit, gobbly, and
blubber,
and
oddwink, twink. Yeah, and so you kind of get that, and like right there, like Harry asks like Percy, is he mad? And he's like, he's a genius, but yeah, he's a little bit mad. So I really like that dynamic to him, and that goes all the way through book 6, it's just really his character. And the movies, he's so serious and he's so like moody.
But we also had that Dumbledore switch because Richard Harris died. I really loved Richard Harris's Dumbledore more than Gambon.
I do too, but Richard Harris was still very
serious.
I don't want to say very serious,
very somber.
Right?
He had a very somber expression on his
face.
Okay.
That's a much better word. He's very somber, and he does kind of do some like giggly things, but he's just kind of somber and almost monotone.
Because in the books, I always pictured him like laughing very like audibly, like giggling at his own jokes kind of guy, whereas in the movies
he's the life of the party at like the Christmas feast, and he's like, come on in everybody, have a cracker, like pull it, see what you got, see what your prize is.
And then in the movies
just kind of palling around and joking around,
very quiet. If he chuckled, is like one chuckle kind of thing, and just very different tone to the character.
So that's definitely my answer, is Dumbledore.
And the movies too?
Oh, did it ask who our favorite character in the movie is?
Well, she asked if who is your favorite character in the book, and were they your favorite character in the movie also?
Oh, so no, he was not my favorite character in the movie.
Who was your favorite character in the movie?
I don't really know, to be honest. Maybe Hermione.
Well, there was so much that was left out. Also, and we'll talk about this at another time, but the movie Hermione and book Hermione are 2 separate people. Most of the characters.
They are.
But she was the one I noticed the biggest split with.
Me too. I think if I had to pick like a main character in the movie, I'd pick Hermione, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Emma Watson
I can't give you a great answer. Why?
Really, for me, she was a great Hermione. So my favorite character in the books is Hagrid. Hagrid to me just feels like coming home. I imagine he smells like grass and leather and just kind of a real rugged smell. And for me, that just smells like a good place to go be because he's so warm and inviting and he's safe. And he was always such a safe character. And I just gravitated toward him so quickly that, I mean, I don't know. He was my favorite character in the books from the get-go. The movies, I saw the movies before I read the books, and he was my favorite character in the movie as well. Robbie Coltrane, to me, some of the other characters, when I was reading them, I didn't see the actors in the parts in their books. but I saw Robbie Coltrane always as Hagrid, and I still think he just was magnificent.
I agree. If I had to pick one that was the most similar to their book character, I would 100% agree with you that it would be Hagrid.
Yeah, and he was everything that I imagined. I mean, even the illustrations by Joe before the movies were even a thing or even thought about, they look like Robbie Coltrane's character. You know, with the big floofy beard and just so very tall and a good, warm expression on his face. Even when he was if he was sad, he was very expressively sad. If he was happy, he was very expressively happy. If he was angry, that was also very expressive too. You always knew how he was thinking, and he was very upfront about his emotions. Even, he was even too honest for his own good throughout the whole series. That's how the kids kept finding out all this stuff.
Exactly. Can't keep a secret.
No, and he was just delightful.
He's in there for comic relief as well.
Right.
Not the UK charity, for actual comic relief. And I felt like that was...
And he did a great job.
Yeah, and thinking back to my Dumbledore point, that was totally lost. And that was part of what made me enjoy him as a book character was that comic relief portion.
Right.
And I also thoroughly enjoyed Hagrid in the book for comic relief, and that did carry over to the movie. So maybe in my mind, when you compare the two, I don't know why they didn't have that go through with Dumbledore. Maybe they thought that too much, because they had to cut out so many, there'd be so much Dumbledore on screen and so much Hagrid on screen that they couldn't have two characters that were
cutting up
goofy
all the time. Plus, some of Dumbledore's roles, or some of his plot points in the books themselves, were quite serious. So,
right.
And I think they cut out some of his more funnier moments from the movies because they had to move along. I just love Hagrid. He's just... And what's interesting going back to translations is most of the good translations, Hagrid is done in a different dialect than, say, the other characters speak. And that tends to hold true for the translations. They'll, in the Scots, Matthew Fitt used Dundonian Scots for Hagrid. And Matthew Fitt is actually from, I think it's Dundee, Scotland. So that's how he paid homage to his hometown, as he gave that dialect to Hagrid.
Very cool. And I know Brock mentioned that in the Basque translation.
Yeah, he speaks a different dialect. Yeah, I think that I've noticed that tends to, in the good translations, that tends to hold fairly true. I think that's really, really cool that they did that.
For sure.
Yes.
Well, we did it. We got through all 7 questions.
Yay. I really enjoyed the discussion. I really enjoyed the chat, actually, because these are things that I hadn't always thought about.
I did too. And it was only made possible because you, our wonderful listeners, sent us some questions. So if you would like to send a question for us to answer on a future episode of Dialogue Alley, you can contact us via our Instagram page at Dialoguealleypodcast. There is also where we will post pictures of things we've talked about on the show today. And you can also send us an email question to our email address, which is dialoguealleypodcast@gmail.com.
Yep, that'll do it.
That will do it. So, Carly, where can people find you on the internet?
I can be found through my website, alltheprettybooks.net. You can find me on Instagram at alltheprettybooks, Twitter at allprettybooks, YouTube alltheprettybooks, and I think that's all. And you can also email me at alltheprettybooks1@gmail.com.
That's true. And I should also mention that typically you're able to put more photos and links on your website of things that we've talked about today.
Right.
Are you back in business for that?
I'm probably not for this next episode because I'm still in the middle of moving everything, but I'm getting a lot closer to being settled.
Perfect. Okay. So for now, just stick to our Instagram page for more information about.
But I'll let us know on our podcast. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy making the content accessible. And I know that so much of what we talk about in the podcast is pretty vision oriented. So I like to make it accessible for people to see what we're talking about because I think it's important. I just am not able to do that at this time.
That's fine. Once you're unpacked, we will get that up there. So I am Erik. I'm on Instagram only at Nocturne Erik, knock like on a door, and Erik with a K. And I post things about books on there. So if you want to reach out to me, that is where you can do so.
Yes.
Remember, you can listen to Dialogue Alley anywhere that you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio. And if you're enjoying what you hear, please give us a rating and some feedback on whatever service that you do listen to us on. We would greatly appreciate that, as well as maybe telling a friend or two that would also be interested in Harry Potter like talking.
Yes.
Because maybe they want to listen too, because why not?
Exactly.
All right, Carly, that's all we got today. Do you have anything else?
I don't.
I don't either. So now it's time to walk back through the archway into our daily lives, and we will talk to you next time on the next episode of Dialogue Alley. Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.